Hello and welcome to the Discover Dayton podcast, the podcast that's all about the Gem City's past, present, and future. My name is Arch Cleave and I'm your host, and today I'm joined by Andrew Hershner, a local historian who runs the History of the Daytonians group on Facebook. He has a wealth of knowledge about Dayton, and I'm excited to talk to him today. Today's theme is early names of Dayton, so we'll look at how Dayton got its name, its nickname, and even some street names. We'll also talk about Daniel Cooper, who some might call Dayton's true founder, so stay tuned. All right, hey Andrew, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming on.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, before we dive into Dayton history, perhaps you could provide a little bit of background on yourself and kind of your interest in Dayton history. I would love to hear that.
Yeah, so I would say that it has to begin early on as a child. One of the biggest things that influenced me is probably my parents, grandparents, and even the stories from my great-grandparents here in Dayton. A lot of the stories they would share was just nostalgic to me as a child. My parents are baby boomers, my mom passed away, unfortunately, in 2017, but my dad will be 76 in March, and they grew up in the booming era of Dayton, the 50s and 60s, and they experienced so many things that they would share with me, Reichs, going down to McCrory's, and those things they stuck with me. And then, of course, my grandmother and grandfathers were both World War II generation, so that kind of was that same nostalgia. They would share things with me from the World War II area of Dayton, and it was just fascinating. So, and then I think the other thing is just kind of the fact that the older I got and realized how much of an impact Dayton had on the world with its inventions and industry, I was just fascinated. I wanted to get that story out there. So, I mean, that's basically kind of how my interest started.
Nice. Well, that's awesome. Well, today's episode kind of theming it, I guess, early names of Dayton. And so I suppose to start off, we should acknowledge that Dayton's named after Jonathan Dayton, who was a New Jersey congressman who purchased the land back in the 1700s. But I understand he was just one of 4 owners who actually purchased the land that became Dayton. So the other 3 names, I'm sure, will be recognizable to Daytonians as well. So can you talk a little about who were these 4 men in relation to Dayton's early history? And why did they choose Dayton to bear the city's name, I guess?
Yeah, the other 3 men you're referring to was General James Wilkinson, Colonel Israel Ludlow, and General Arthur St. Clair, who was actually the governor of the Northwest Territory. A gentleman by the name of John Sims from New Jersey actually sold them 2 ranges of land that would become known as the Dayton Purchase. Sims himself was a delegate to the Continental Congress and a Revolutionary War veteran. The 4 men actually paid 83 cents an acre for 60,000 acres of land at the confluence of the Great Miami and Mad Rivers. As far as the name goes, Israel Ludlow is the one that chose Jonathan Dayton's name for the city. It was basically just an honor. Dayton himself had been a delegate to the Constitutional Convention and is actually the youngest person to sign the Constitution. So with that being said, it's interesting to note Dayton actually never set foot in the city of Dayton or anywhere in the Miami Valley for that matter. So the city is basically kind of just in name only.
Gotcha. So he just gave us his name, and that was it, pretty much.
Right. So basically, the beginnings of Dayton kind of starts around September of 1795 when 2 survey parties came to the area, one of which was led by Captain John Bunlap, whose job was to basically just survey the boundaries of the purchase. Mm-hmm. And the other party was led by another New Jersey native, Daniel Cooper. His job was actually to cut a road from Fort Hamilton all the way to the Mad River. A little bit of this road actually remains today. It's a small segment between David Road and Kettering and Route 725 in Centerville. So yeah, that's it still exists. It's not, the whole road doesn't exist in its original form, but there's a little portion that still exists now. And then in November of 1795, they would come back to Dayton, and Ludlow would initially plat the first streets and outlots of what would be the city of Dayton. But as we're going to talk about later, things would be changed a little bit so that we would lose that original platting.
That was a great deal on land, by the way, back then. It sounds like. How much did you say it was per acre?
They originally had purchased it at 83 cents an acre.
Wow.
Now, when you're taking that into factoring the price in regards to today's inflation, it would have been quite expensive, actually, just because at the time, the amount of money that they would have made as a daily or monthly or even annual wage would have been very small compared to that 83 cents.
Sure, that makes sense. Well, it's my understanding the first inhabitants, at least of European descent, who came to Dayton, came from Cincinnati. Can you talk a little bit about the Thompson Party, who they were, and how they arrived here?
Yeah, the Thompson Party was actually one of three parties that consisted of Dayton's first residents.
Okay.
Originally, 46 people had agreed to move to Dayton. Ultimately, 36 men, women, and children would make the journey. They left Cincinnati in March of 1796. The first two parties were led by William Hammer and another familiar Daytonian, George Newcomb. And they came by wagon on the Mad River Road that I had mentioned earlier that had been cut out by Daniel Cooper.
Mm-hmm.
The Thompson Party itself that you were referring to was led by Samuel Thompson, and they came by a type of canoe known as a pirogue, and they came up the Miami River. Along with the Thompson Party, another member was Benjamin Van Cleave, who a lot of people may recognize as the other famous Daytonian. He was later Dayton's first school teacher. He was also Dayton's first postmaster and the first clerk of courts.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Thompson Party was actually the first of all three of these parties to arrive, and they actually landed on the shores of what today would be where St. Clair Street is. And they landed there on April 1st, 1796, which is historically recognized as Dayton's birthday.
Okay, nice. So, like, close to the, what's that? The Metro Park Festival area.
Yes, the Riverscape area today.
Okay, awesome. So I understand that in 1798, Dayton almost ceased to exist due to a problem with the original land titles that were sold to the four guys who purchased Dayton from Sims. So can you talk a little bit about, like, what was that issue and how did they avert disaster there?
Yeah, so ultimately John Sims, who had sold them the land known as the Dayton Purchase, he defaulted on his financial obligations, and in 1800 the federal government took back the land that was to become Dayton. They offered to actually sell the property back to the residents that were living here for $2 an acre, which was way beyond the means of what most Daytonians could afford to pay. And by 1802, there were actually only 5 families still left in the original area where they Israel Ludlow had originally platted out. Wow.
And so what was the solution, I guess, to that? Did they end up buying the land back, or
So ultimately what happened is that Daniel Cooper would step up. He had decided that he really liked this area and decided himself to purchase a lot in Dayton. So he decided to stay here, and this affected him very greatly. He did not want to see Dayton disappear off the map. So he would step up and actually purchase more than 3,000 acres, including the town site itself. And what Cooper did was he charged only $1 for the in-lots, and he allowed the purchasers to be able to pay as they could. So basically, they were able to make payments, if you will, on the lots that they had purchased, which made it much easier for them to be able to buy the lot. And Cooper himself would then also make it much easier for people outside of Dayton to want to come here, because they were buying the land directly from Cooper, so they were much more assured that they were being granted a secure title, since it was a direct buy from Cooper and not from the federal government, because of all the other things that had happened with the defaulting from Sims.
Gotcha. Okay, nice. Well, so, since we're talking about kind of the location that they arrived and everything, when people thought of Dayton, in the early 1800s. Where was the bulk of settlement in relation maybe to some more modern day landmarks?
Yeah, so most of it would kind of been along the river where, like I said, we said earlier, Riverscape is today. It would have been along the river, along mostly the area of Monument, which then was known as Water Street. Cooper himself actually had a lot at the corner of Jefferson and Monument. And then later, he actually sold that to another Daytonian that most people will recognize the name of Colonel Robert Patterson. And then Cooper would actually move to the corner of First and Ludlow, and he would build a new log cabin. Another one of the original settlers was that we mentioned earlier that was part of one of the original leaders of one of the parties that came here from Cincinnati was George Newcomb. And he would build a 2-story tavern at the corner of Monument and Main on the southwest corner. And as most people know it today, Newcomb's Tavern, which is at Carillon, is Dayton's oldest structure to still exist. Although it's not on its original foundation, it's considered Dayton's oldest structure. And at the time, Newcomb's Tavern, not only because of its 2-story size, it was a little bit larger than some of the other buildings in the city. It became the center of a lot of activity in Dayton. Not only was it an inn, but it was also basically the first judicial center in Dayton. The first sheriff's office and jail was located here. Many of the other activities in the city took place here, including court sessions, and occasionally it was also used for worshiping and also for learning.
Wow. It's kind of a one-size-fits-all building, it sounds like.
Yes, it was a very important early piece in Dayton's history that fortunately has been preserved. Newcomb's Tavern was actually moved early on in Dayton's history because an apartment building was built on that southwest corner, and it was known as the Insco Apartments. And because of that, Newcomb's Tavern was moved to prevent it from being demolished, and it was put into Van Cleave Park, which is part of where Riverscape is today. And in 1964, it would be moved again to its final place, as I mentioned before, where it resides today at Carillon.
Okay, nice. So going back to Daniel Cooper a bit, I understand that he donated some land for different uses in Dayton. What came of those donations? What did those turn into?
Yeah, actually, Cooper donated quite a bit of land since he ultimately purchased all of the land back from the federal government. He donated a few pieces of the land for other purposes. And one of those purposes was for a cemetery. And that was basically located on 5th Street between Ludlow and Wilkinson. Now, you might say today that area has been developed. So what happened to the cemetery?
Right.
So basically, all of the original burials in that cemetery were moved to Woodland when Woodland Cemetery was opened up in 1841.
Okay.
He also donated what we know today, which bears his name, as Cooper Park, where the downtown public library is.
Oh, yeah. Nice.
The other thing that he donated land for, which is probably the most still significant and most widely recognized tract of land in the city of Dayton, is where the courthouse is today.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Now, the original courthouse wasn't the one that we see now. It was actually a brick structure. But when it was demolished, the new courthouse, which we recognize today, was built and completed in 1850.
Okay, gotcha.
He also donated land for a school for girls, and he also founded the first school for boys known as the Dayton Academy. So those were some of the contributions as far as donating land for mostly civic needs of the city at the time.
So I understand, too, that the original plat that Israel Ludlow drew up isn't actually what we have today. Who came up with Dayton's current layout?
Yeah, so when Cooper purchased the land back from the federal government and was selling the in-lots and the out-lots, he actually realized that the original plat that was drawn up by Israel Ludlow wasn't working out that great. So he actually replatted the entire city into the grid that we know today, with the wide streets that Dayton became known for in the early and later parts of the 19th and into the early parts of the 20th century. That was all done by him.
I understand that he also came to a somewhat untimely end. How was it that he died?
Yes, actually, this is a very freakish set of circumstances. On July 13th, 1818, Cooper was actually assisting in the construction of the First Presbyterian Church, and the bell had arrived for the steeple. And Cooper volunteered himself to move it to the church. Unfortunately, he struggled to get it in his large wheelbarrow, and as he was going down 2nd Street, a blood vessel burst in his brain, killing him instantly.
Wow, that's pretty sad.
It is. It is a very freakish, as I said, set of circumstances. And Cooper is actually interred at Woodland Cemetery along with many other famous Daytonians.
Well, in reading about some early Dayton history, I know that by 1810 there were a number of different businesses. What were some of those early or the earliest businesses, I guess, to pop up in Dayton?
Yeah, so some of the most early industry that we see in Dayton is basically things like grist mills, corn mills, sawmills, and even going back to Dayton's roots as a mecca for breweries. One of the first businesses was a distillery. There was actually a mill race located where the Day Air Ballpark is today in Webster Station. So that kind of was the power for some of these early mills. And then, in fact, in 1829, the canal would be extended to Dayton from Cincinnati. And that's kind of when we start to see this emergence of Dayton becoming this industrial powerhouse that we know today.
Also, the canal kind of helped with that process.
Yes, absolutely, because by that time, Dayton was doing things like tobacco processing, and we also had cotton mill. And even as the canal expanded and we began to have a portion of the canal, an offshoot of the canal that was known as the hydraulic canal. And with these hydraulic offshoots from the canal, other factories started to pop up, including Dayton had a clock factory early on. So, and you just start to see Dayton progress into this, like I said, powerhouse of industry that we all know it has been today.
Nice. Well, I want to come back to that in a second, but before we completely leave kind of the earlier history, you also mentioned before the show that there's an early feature marking the city's founding that's hidden underneath the streets of Dayton. What is that, and where can you find it?
Yeah, so basically, during the reconstruction of Main Street in 1992, they decided to bring the George Washington Fair Monument back downtown. It had originally been located in the center of Main and Monument, and in 1948, it was moved across the river. And as part of this reconstruction, it was placed back downtown, but now where most of us know it is today, about a half a block south. And during this reconstruction, they discovered the first survey marker that Daniel Cooper had used to plat the city with. And it's made out of limestone. It's not something that someone can just go and see. It's kind of in the sidewalk at the corner of Main and Monument in front of what today is known as the Riverfront Grand Apartments. And it's covered with a manhole cover, but every day people are walking over top of this and have no idea it's there.
That's really cool. I wouldn't have guessed that. So just to fast forward, I guess, a bit, Dayton eventually becomes known as the Gem City. Can you tell us how we got that nickname and what the gem was in reference to?
Yeah, so actually the origin of this nickname, the Gem City, has always kind of been up for debate. There's several different theories behind where it came from. One of these theories attributes the name to a famous racehorse that was here in Dayton, and his name was Jim. So some people think that the notoriety and the fame that this racehorse brought may have been the catalyst for the beginning of the use of the name. Another theory, which some more widely accept, is that it refers to an article that was written by a reporter from the Cincinnati Dayton Chronicle, an article from August 18th, 1845. And it was a reporter known simply as T. That's all we know him as. That was his pen name. Mm-hmm. And he wrote in this article, and I'm going to quote it, he says that the most indifferent observer will not fail to notice Dayton. The wide streets kept in excellent order, the noble blocks of stores filled with choice, and of course cheap goods. More than all, the exceeding beauty and neatness of the dwellings. You at once mark with a white stone in a small bend of the great Miami River with canals on the east and south. It may be fairly said that Dayton is the gem of all our interior cities. It possesses wealth, refinement, enterprise, and a beautiful country. And this was basically, I verbatim read what he wrote. And so a lot of people generally like to accept this as possibly what may have started the use of the name Gem City. We don't see mention of the nickname again until 1882 when William Bickham, the editor for the Dayton Journal, began to push for the name to be adopted officially in his editorial columns. And then, as far as businesses are concerned, the first business to use the Gem City name was the Gem City Stove Company in 1885. But unfortunately, there are no original sources to cite saying this is where the name Gem City originated. There's just only some speculation and some possible theories.
Gotcha. And I think I've heard it mentioned in reference to like the jewel in the crown of the Queen City. Is it any relation at all to Cincinnati?
Yes, there's been some speculation in the past that people had noted that because Cincinnati was so close to Dayton and it was referred to as the Queen City, that she was the jewel in the Queen's crown.
Okay, cool. That's really interesting. All right, well, we're running out of time for this episode, but I hope you'll come back often. And in the meantime, if people are interested in learning more about Dayton history, you have a Facebook group, History of the Daytonians. Where can people find that if they would like to check out your group?
Yeah, so you can just search us on Facebook and ask to join. And as long as you're a former or a current Daytonian, we'll get you approved in the group. This group basically started in 2018, and a friend of mine by the name of Robert Robertson started the group, and basically it has just grown into something that we never could have imagined. One of the greatest things about this group is the fact that not only can we share things that we post and things that we write, but also the members are able to share. And one of the greatest things that a lot of the members have been able to share is their personal photographs. And that's one of the big things that we're looking for is photographs that haven't been published in any book or aren't in any of the local archives. These are some of the greatest gems that I think that our group contributes to Dayton history. So just be sure to check us out on Facebook.
Well, I am really glad that you started that group, and I thank you for managing it. I really enjoy the posts you put up. I know right now we're coming up on the anniversary of the flood, and I've seen some posts about that, so that maybe is a sneak peek of what people can see if they go check it out, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely, definitely. We're getting ready to do the flood anniversary series coming up here March 21st to the 27th.
Nice, awesome. All right, well, thanks so much again for coming on. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to having you back sometime soon.
All right, thank you, and I appreciate you having me. Have me back anytime. Thanks.
Awesome, will do. Thank you. All right, well, that about wraps things up for this episode. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe, consider submitting a review, and letting your friends know about it. We've got some other great episodes in the works, and we're always looking for guests. So if you have a story to tell about Dayton's past, present, or future, please reach out through the website at www.discoverdaytonpodcast.com. You can find us also on Facebook and Instagram, Tumblr and YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening, and stay funky, Dayton.